But now let's get some analysis on the key political stories from David Collins, the Northern editor of the Sunday Times. And one of the reasons we're very keen to speak to you, David, is because you spent all of yesterday with Andy Burnham. I believe you were in Sheffield. What was the vibe? How did he go down up in the north?
The vibe, I'd say he went down reasonably well. I think, he was kind of accompanied by his sort of court that kind of goes with him in the north these days. So Louise Haigh, John Healey was there, the Chancellor, and various kind of special advisors from Number 10. He did a speech in the gardens of a family nursery, like a community centre that's been paid for with devolution money, so it fitted the theme of what he was doing. And he made, his announcement on devolution, which he sees as his mission to, move money and power out of Westminster into the hands of the mayors, which is obviously... It's a message that goes down well, I would say, amongst kind of his northern northern voters, probably.
That hasn't gone down well with all sorts of people, including various MPs in Cornwall, who point out that they would miss out on this because they haven't got a mayor and they don't want a mayor, or rather, if they have a mayor, they want a mayor just for Cornwall, not for Cornwall, Devon, and Dorset. So I think this is the problem: is that Andy Burnham, he's how much is he preaching to the choir? How much is he just winning over people who already quite like the cut of his jib?
Well, this is the interesting point. So I spoke to the devolved mayor for Cambridgeshire, for example, and he, we're doing a piece this week, and he's making the point that so his entire kind of thing that he's brought in is fiscal devolution. So mayors keep their income tax, a proportion of income tax receipts that are generated in the area, along with business rates, a proportion of the business rates. What nobody knows at the moment is how much that, each of these regions will keep, what proportion. There is a kind of an idea that swirls around Andy Burnham's circle of equalising the different regions, so wealthier regions paying for the poorer ones, which in effect might mean that Cambridgeshire pays a bit more, of its income tax receipts. It gives them over to somewhere like the North East, which won't have as obviously needs more investment.
But surely that's what happens already in the very heavily centralised UK fiscal system. The rich South East, particularly London, funds the rest of the UK. I don't quite understand why spending more of your income tax receipts in be it Yorkshire or be it up in Cumbria is going to actually see more money go to specific areas. What's the magic formula that will ensure that the poorer areas outside of the South East get to see that money?
Well, I think the argument that Burnham would make is that what the mayors have lacked, and this, to be fair to Andy Burnham, it's not a Labour theory. This is something that George Osborne was arguing about about a decade ago under his Northern Powerhouse kind of theory that Whitehall and Westminster is too centralised, and that we do need these anchors of power in the great cities around the country. And at the heart of that would be a mayor who has the funding and freedom to spend the money, and that's what Andy Burnham and the mayors would argue that they've not had in the past. They get grants from government, yes. They get, but they're quite complicated. There's a lot of reporting restrictions around them. How you spend the money, you've got to tell the Treasury. The ring fence for certain things. What the income tax devolution would mean is that they get a pot of money, whatever proportion that will be. Say it's 2, 3, 4% of income tax generated in an area, and then they can do literally what Andy Burnham was telling me yesterday. They can do whatever they want with it. So if Steve Rotherham wants to develop line Lime Street Station in Liverpool, or Liverpool Central Station train station. You can spend it on that. Bev Craig, who's become mayor yesterday, she can spend the money on an extended tram or her underground platforms at Manchester. But they can do whatever they want.
Well, yeah, but David, you could say they can do whatever they want, but we've had Ben Houchen, who's the mayor for Tees Valley, who said, I'd like to give my local residents a tax rebate. And lots of reform councillors said, oh, yeah, that's a nice idea. And Andy Burnham's turned around and said, oh, no, I didn't mean that you could all become your own mini chancellors. But if you believe in proper devolution, you have to surely allow, if that's what the local residents want, if they want a tax rebate rather than, a new hospital or resurfacing of the roads, then, well, why not?
Well, it's a fair point. I mean, that's the point that Houchen is making. But I think what Andy Burnham would say is that this devolution, fiscal devolution, is about driving growth in an area. And, I know Houchen would argue putting money in pockets will allow people to spend more, therefore you get growth that way. What Andy Burnham was saying to me, he said the mini-chancellor quote to me yesterday in front of me, and his argument was very much that if you don't invest, you won't get the return of growth you need. And part of this is about mayors can then keep the extra growth they make from people's income going up in a region. The mayors will get to keep that. So this Labour administration believes there'll be a knock-on effect in 2, 3, 4 years. The idea is you keep growing, you keep keeping that money, you keep reinvesting it. Yeah. So to give a short-term handout of whatever to residents living in an area. I mean, it create an interesting situation, wouldn't it? Because would everyone suddenly want to live in Tees Valley? Because they're only going to get a bit of a tax discount. All those villages that are on the border, you might think, I want to live in this street rather than that one because I'll get a couple of extra £100 a month back in my pocket.
Well, it's more than possible. Some people live in certain streets because they get a bin collection every week rather than once a fortnight on the other side of the street. Now you mentioned Bev Craig. So overnight we got the confirmation that she has become Manchester Mayor. She replaces obviously Andy Burnham, and it was a pretty thumping big victory for Labour, wasn't it? And fascinatingly, the Tories were pushed into 5th place by Restore, the kind of pretty right-wing party set up by Rupert Lowe. What was the mood up with Andy Burnham's people about how were they very confident that indeed that Bev would win with such a large margin?
Yeah, they were going in. I think the polling from YouGov was so kind of, and all the polling, generally, was very much that she'd win on the second preference. So Greater Manchester has the second preference vote where you kind of, I voted myself on Thursday, where you go in, you put your first candidate, then you put your second. If you get any candidate gets over 50%, then it doesn't go to the second preference vote. They're not counted. So when it's been that system, it's never. I think it's been out of the 3 elections Andy Burnham fought, 2 of them were that system, and 1 of them was first past the post. It never went to the second preference.
It's the general mood, though. It's the general mood amongst the Burnham camp that actually the elevation of Andy Burnham to the prime ministership that has taken the sting out of Nigel Farage and reform.
I think that's what they would say. I think they'd see this as a validation of Andy Burnham's 9 years as mayor. If people didn't want continuity, Bev is the continuity candidate. She will keep in place the B network. She'll keep in place all of Andy's plans for Greater Manchester on skills and the MBAC and everything else. So they will see that as a validation. Andy Burnham will see that as a validation this morning. Reform have been obviously hampered by this by-election in Clacton. Nigel Farage, he's not been in Greater Manchester. He's not been giving probably the campaigning voice that he might have given hadn't he been, distracted. And the interesting thing about these results are that in May, you saw, 100 kind of new reform candidates returned in the local elections in different areas like Tameside, Oldham, Trafford. But that is the areas where actually Labour have done really well.
Yeah.
Which will be worrying for reform, and the Greens also, they're kind of nowhere.
Well, it's worth for people who haven't caught the news this morning that the figures are that Labour, Bev Craig, won with 47% of the vote. Reform got 21%. Greens got 12%. Restore, this newish party of Rupert Lowe, got 9%. The Tories were on 8%, and the Lib Dems only on 3%. I mean, that's astonishingly low. I'm interested to know. One of the things about Andy Burnham, one of the criticisms is that he's very good at making, dazzling policy announcement, and then he basically runs away when anyone asks him any questions about the detail, about how he's going to fund this. You were there all of yesterday. Was he taking questions from the press, and was he answering them?
Yeah, I mean, he does. He kind of... So the interesting thing for me is that I've been kind of Northern editor for 9 years, all of Andy's time, and the engagement with Number 10 has been dreadful, quite frankly. In that time, I've gone through Theresa May, I've gone through Boris, I've gone through Rishi, I've gone through Keir. There is it's only 2 weeks in, so I am hesitant, but Number 10 is engaging the Northern correspondents like never before at the moment. So, we're in direct contact. We've been told where he is. We've been told to turn up. He gave us 20 minutes of his time, just 5 of us basically grilling him in a little hall in Sheffield. I mean, we've never had that sort of access to a Prime Minister before. But in the same way, we've made the point that if a lot of your, policy and, you've got Number 10 North now, you're looking at a rebalancing of power. Arguably the media has to come with that. You can't be briefing policies about the North that are being driven by Number 10 North in Manchester to journalists in London. You see my point. So in that sense, there is a bit of a gear change in my access personally is much better with him. And what I would say, Andy is a very instinctive politician. On the detail, this is where I would say, is not his strength. So, for example, he would announce things in Greater Manchester as mayor, which he instinctively thinks are good ideas. But, you burrow into the detail and you can tell, has the homework been carried out, where some local authority leaders are, that is their raison d'etre. Bev Craig is very much a details person, whereas I wouldn't say Andy was.
Yeah.
So when you're asking him about sort of the wider questions on how are you going to pay for social care and it's okay, you want an NHS style system for social care, who's going to pay for it and how? Those answers aren't forthcoming yet, maybe because they don't know yet, quite frankly.
Well, David, interestingly, I kept on saying that you were in the North yesterday with Andy Burnham in Sheffield. Matthew has WhatsApp to say Sheffield is not the North. I would take issue. I think anywhere north of Yorkshire. Yorkshire in the North is the North.
From Newcastle.
Well, I don't know. He doesn't say. Briefly, because we're slightly running out of time, Neil Armin Smith has been appointed as Andy Burnham's top economic advisor. Briefly, what do you know about him and how significant is this?
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, he's not somebody that's been in Andy Burnham's circle, I must say. He was a special advisor to Rachel Reeves. He's got quite a colourful background, I understand. He used to be in a band called Clean Bandit, where he played the violin. And people talk about him as this he's quite a dashing, handsome young man who used to be in quite a popular band, who has lots of economics qualifications and is a very bright chap. Came into Rachel Reeves as a special advisor, where he specialised in the City of London and advised her on sort of reform around the City of London. And he's basically, Andy's inherited him from the old administration. But it'll be interesting because there's a lot of people swirling around at the moment, Andy, and it depends on who settles. It's a real mixture of who he was with, in Greater Manchester Combined Authorities mayor. Some of his favourites, like Tom Whitney, for example, who I've known for years. He went to work for Heidi Alexander. He's very much a transport kind of special advisor type. he's going to be a key one, as well as the guy you mentioned. There's a lot of people trying to get in here at the moment. It depends who manages to stay and who gets ejected.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. That was David Collins of the Sunday Times. And you can read more of his writings in tomorrow's paper or via a digital subscription via the Times app or at thetimes.com.